touch with you.
Oh.
This is, and okay. It's a great segue in a variety of reasons talking about gardening.
And they're by
because that for the last few years has been part of Dynasty's mission with the Environmental Collaborative Office through the Homegrown program, which Dynasty was managing for ECO. And so we're really pleased to have Dynasty with us this evening, who's been such a wonderful partner with our Sherman Park Environmental Collaborative Office neighborhood group, and with the group at in Walnut Way and the other neighborhood. Tell me real quick. Walnut Way.
Lindsay Heights.
Lindsay Heights. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Lindsay Heights. So Dynasty has been working with them as well. And Dynasty has also been recognized by Nearby Nature as a rising star in the environmental justice work. And we had an opportunity to thank Dynasty for all the good work that she's done with us, supporting us as we've sought to green Sherman Park and address environmental justice issues in our neighborhood. But we regret to announce also that Dynasty, although it's exciting for you, Dynasty, is going on to work with Richard Rothstein, who wrote The Color of Law. And she's going to be continuing, you're going to be continuing to do your racial justice and anti-racism work. And we trust and hope that there'll be many opportunities for us to work and collaborate together as brothers and sisters in this Milwaukee community. So Dynasty is a homegrown talent and committed to, as you said on Monday, you're about Milwaukee. And so we really appreciate your energy and efforts. And so she's been working with her collaborator at Clean Wisconsin and
Michael Lee.
Michael Lee.
Yeah, let's just want to jump in.
Yeah, so Michael Lee at Clean Wisconsin and another colleague on developing a webinar that we've been looking forward to sharing with the community on Eco 101. So I welcome all of you here. This is being recorded, so excuse me. So we will look forward to sharing it with a broader community. And you can find the webinar on our Sherman Park SPCA website, and that'll be posted in the coming weeks. So thank you all for being here. Mabel, do you have anything you want to say as an introductory words?
Good evening to all, and thank you for joining us. I am going to be tech support tonight. So we thank you for joining us again, and we will also, Tim, I will pull up that flyer when you're ready. And Steve, if you can also mention the reckless driving event that's coming up June 4th. I have that flyer also ready that we can share.
Great.
Right now?
I don't know if you want to do it before or after.
Let's wait on announcements till the end.
Yeah.
And after the presentation, we'll let you time for questions and for reflecting together. But again, thank you for all of you for being here, and take it away.
All right, and thank you, Pastor Tim, for that awesome introduction. Thank you. It's bittersweet to transition out of ECO. It really is. So I will share my screen. One moment here. Okay, so today, myself and Michael Lee will be presenting on climate justice in Milwaukee. We are presenting as a means to help inform folks about climate change who are not familiar. So if you are a climate change guru and all knower of climate change, this is probably going to be a refresher for you, but we are hoping to connect with folks who are not familiar with climate change. So I am Dynasty Caesar, the Environmental Sustainability Program Coordinator. And Michael, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Maithili. I'm the climate justice organizer at Clean Wisconsin, and I've had the opportunity to work with Dynasty on this presentation for the past few months.
Yes, and Maithili is awesome. So I just have to say that's not even enough to explain Maithili. She's been a great partner. And we also worked on this with Mandy McAllister. She is the founder of Hummingbird MKE, and she's been a great partner as well. So the presentation objective today is to inform you of what climate change is. Often it's kind of this term that we say that we're not completely familiar with, but we know that it's happening around us. But we just can't, some people struggle with explaining what climate change is. Second, we will discuss the impacts of climate change and how they affect some communities more than others, mainly communities of color. And then we will transition into explaining how it affects Milwaukee residents. We'll show you some experiences that may be all too familiar to you, that you may remember, may not, if you're not a Milwaukee native. And then we'll close out with talking about some benefits that the city of Milwaukee has developed and other organizations may have as well, in ways that you can get involved in what the city of Milwaukee plans to do to address some of those things. When we talk about addressing climate change, the city is focusing on minimizing the issue and not necessarily erasing it because it's a global issue. And so it's not something that our city can do on its own. It's something that we'd have to do collectively. So what we'll do, the agenda, is first of all, we'll introduce you to climate change. Then we'll talk about how climate change affects us on a global scale. And then we'll transition into discussing that from a Milwaukee perspective, bringing it home to you and how it affects you and your neighborhood. Then we'll transition into explaining how it affects communities of color, and then closing out with climate solutions. Often when we talk about climate change, sometimes we feel like it's the end of the world and we don't know what to do after that. And we kind of leave feeling bogged down. So we'll close out with, on a lighter note, letting you know what some of the climate solutions are and what some of our local organizations plan to do. And then finishing out with what the Climate and Equity Action Plan plans to do, and then how you can get involved. So I know you were hoping that Maithili and I would do all of the talking. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So we want to give you a chance to introduce yourselves because Maithili and I don't know all of you. So we'll ask you to introduce yourselves in your smaller groups. I don't know, Ms. Babel, if I have control over doing breakout groups, but I can start that. I don't know if you want to. But we'll give you an opportunity to discuss what climate change is to you. How do you define climate change? What are the causes of climate change? And then how is it affecting you?
Hello?
Pastor Tim?
I'm just wondering I'm wondering if we're a small enough group that we could have that conversation together.
Yes. Yeah, it looks like we've got a couple folks on here. So who wants to start with the introductions? And we can popcorn this too.
I can start since I am new to this group. Thank you all very much for having me. I'm very excited to be here and talk about this topic with you. So my name, again, as I said, is Maithili. I work at Clean Wisconsin to do exactly this, talk about climate change in communities and understand what it means for people that live in Wisconsin and then how we can work towards solving it. And so to me, climate change means something that affects all of humanity and the way I expect my life to be. As a very young person, I expect my life to be a certain way one day, but climate change will really change where I can live, what kind of jobs are available, what kind of health risks are at stake. And so the cause of climate change I see as being our fossil fuel industry. And overconsumption. And I think it's affecting us today in that everyone is going to be affected to some degree, but there are groups of people that are going to very much have their whole lives turned upside down by this problem. For example, I'm from California, and wildfires are a constant threat. I'm worried all the time about my family being in the path of one. So that's what it means to me. Thanks again for having me, and I will pass it over to Mabel.
Okay, I am Mabel Lamb. I am the Executive Director of Sherman Park Community Association. And I'm also a resident of Sherman Park. To me, climate change is how the environment is going to affect humankind and the changes on the planet as it relates to our earth, our plants, animals, just our whole habitat. So that's what it means to me. And I hope we can convince the rest of the world that this is an issue that needs to be addressed immediately. So, how about Tim?
So I'm Tim Perkins. I'm a retired United Church of Christ minister and live in Sherman Park with my wife, Bonnie. And we both have been committed to trying to work to be more ecologically minded ourselves, although we have a long way to go. But my motivation for working on this issue is concern about environmental justice issues and how we can help people in our community live cleaner and healthier lives. So it's concerns about lead and water, and concerns about energy inequity, and how we can reduce the need for energy in our community, but also green us at the same time. So I'm going to pass it on to Anne.
Hello, Ann Knadler. I live in Sherman Park, specifically in the Uptown Crossing Neighborhood Association, and I help to operate a community garden. For me, climate change is the horrible weather events that have been happening the last couple of years. They've just really escalated, I think, and to a very scary situation. And I don't think anybody is going to escape unless things happen quickly. And to me, I'm just overwhelmed by it all. I'll pass it on to Doris, listed as Chester.
Doris, you may have to unmute yourself, and if someone's not comfortable speaking, that's fine too. Just, you can mention that.
Other folks want to jump in, or
Maybe she stepped away.
yeah,
Go ahead,
she may have.
I'm Steve O'Connell, and I'm in the Grassland Manor neighborhood, and I'm one of the resident leaders over in this area. Climate change is amazing. I'm into the gardening thing, and to see the different growing zones that have changed in the last 15 years. It's amazing when it kind of stares you in the face. The causes of climate change, really what everybody else has said, is the whole thing of the ozone and how it's been affected. And Anne, you kind of related to it, that the dramatic changes in our atmosphere and how it's affecting us here on the earth and everything that goes on around there. And then climate change affecting us today. I'm amazed at, I fish down at the lake. I'm amazed at watching the level of the water levels and how they've changed in the last couple of years. One year they're right at the top of the breakwater down there. Your feet were wet all the time. 3 years, 4 years before that was down 3 feet. The water was that low, and they had to change all the piers, floating piers, take them off the pillars that they were on. And then a year ago, 2 years ago, what happened over at South Shore, that horrible storm, and how the storm just ravaged that poor yacht club over there. And so those kinds of things, as you kind of look around, you begin to see how it's really affecting us. And let's see, Mary Achek.
Okay. Let's see. I moved to Milwaukee in 1959, or settled here, and lived in 3 different places in Sherman Park. The bulk of it, and the more recent one, was in Sunset Heights, very near St. Joe's. In fact, I used to be able to walk to work in 5 minutes. Walk over to St. Joe's. It was a really nice commute. Anyhow, the climate change, yes, as has been mentioned, yes, it's all the oddities of the weather brought on, I'm sure, by all of the upper climatic changes, and it's affected everything. It's changed jet stream patterns. It's changed even the Nino and Nina patterns, and the results are some pretty fierce. Well, I've gardened all my life, and I think it seems now that spring is like 3 weeks later than it used to be when I was in my 20s and 30s. Although we don't have the 50 below zero things anymore, which that's nice, but the rest of it is just, yeah, it's hard. So, and we're very much being affected by it, yes. So, okay, let's see, Sherry, did you go?
Nope, I didn't. I can jump in. Climate change, you guys kind of covered a lot, most of it, or all of it for me. Definitely the weather patterns and our rain patterns. And it just really concerns me with the next generations, what that's going to look like. I'm just really concerned with like my grandchildren, my great grandchildren. What is it going to look like then? It's kind of scary. Just from like last year with the weather and the snow. Year before last, we had so much snow that we actually couldn't. It was hard to keep up with the storms. We had so much snow. Not last season, season before last, and where this season you could have counted the snows on one hand, and how the weather is just affected by it. Just last week we were in the almost 90 degrees. I was in Chicago. It was like 90 degrees, and we're talking May. So it's just the change, and what can we do to actually better it for ourselves and the next generation? I don't know who's is anybody left?
Monica hasn't had a chance, or Joe.
For Joe.
Go ahead, Monica.
The weather is a concern, but tangential to that is the one that gets me is the lack of fresh water. And the fact that a number of the wars that are going on around the world are related to people needing to get fresh water, how it impacts things like girls being able to go to school and everything else. And the temperature rises. I heard a news article on NPR, so you know it's true, today that it's 120 in Delhi already.
Wow.
And it doesn't usually hit that till July.
Yeah.
And how people were trying to survive because there's very little air conditioning. A lot of places don't even have electrical functioning, and that we have to look at how this is impacting us globally. And if we start losing all of our freshwater resources into the ocean, we're going to be sunk, literally. Okay, Joe, I guess it's you. And you're muted, so.
Thank you, Monica.
Okay.
Everybody, I'm moving back and forth between cooking here, so thanks for letting me go last or next to last. My name is Joe Fitzgerald. I work with a nonprofit organization that's partnering with a lot of folks on the call here in Sherman Park. Our organization's called Milwaukee Water Commons. We're active in the climate space, and I gotta say, like, a lot of what folks are talking about on here is definitely what resonates for me. I think a lot of the science behind climate change is real in my mind, but it's generally the impacts that people are feeling here in our community that really hit me hard, in terms of flooding and major storms, big wind events like last August when all the trees got knocked down, how hot it gets in the summer and how hard that is. But just to add another one in here that I think about a lot when we're talking to people about climate change is the mental health impact of just having disasters like every other day. And that wearing on you. I think that's something that really sits with me a lot, is the climate anxiety, I guess, that people experience.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I really appreciate how well everyone articulated all the effects of climate change. It's ridiculous how much we don't realize that this is happening around us. And so, especially Joe, I really didn't think about the mental health aspect of it. And even just thinking about being Wisconsinites and dealing with snow, and then it being, you know, all nice or really nice outside and then dreary and dark and sad, and what that does to your does to you emotionally and mentally. So thank you everyone for sharing your feedback. Mythili?
Hi, everyone. So y'all have hit most of the main points about climate change and the ways that it's impacting us. So now we're going to just give a little bit of a primer for those that maybe aren't as familiar with the topic. So briefly, we want to discuss climate change along with some keywords. So one is weather. Weather is just what we see is day to day, such as it's hot or sunny one day, or it's cold and windy another day. The climate is the usual weather of the place. So here in Milwaukee, with our climate, the weather is usually hot and humid in the summer and cold and snowy in the winter. But as our climate changes, the usual weather patterns we've come to expect can change too. Like some of you noted earlier, winters lasted basically like 3 weeks, a month longer than usual this year. And that's affecting all sorts of things, from crop yields for farmers to gardening season for people that just love to connect with nature. And this is also affecting summers. They're getting hotter and longer, and this is causing problems for all sorts of people. So this is all happening because of human activity. Can we go to the next slide? So to put it simply, humans have been burning fossil fuels for nearly 300 years. And fossil fuels mean things such as coal, oil, and gas. And we need these to power our societies. Everything from our factories to our homes to our transportation to our food is dependent on the way that we use our energy. But when we burn fossil fuels, they release gases into our atmosphere known as greenhouse gases that trap heat. And as they trap heat and warm the Earth's atmosphere, it causes a whole range of impacts all around the world that fundamentally shifts the climate that is there. And we have adapted to the climates that we live in over thousands of years, and our climates are now shifting rapidly within people's lifetimes. And so the global warming that's causing climate change is impacting communities all around the world in different ways, including very specifically in ways in Milwaukee. So we want to hear about some of the impacts that some of you have noticed. You've already mentioned a few earlier, such as water level shifting and gardening levels, gardening season changing and storms. But we'd love to hear about some other impacts you've seen either here or around the world. And you could share it in the chat, or you could speak it out loud. Feel free to do either.
More bugs.
More bugs, definitely. That's a good example. That's a very specific thing that like scientists have noticed, that with warmer seasons, there are more bugs. And that means increased risk of disease too, unfortunately.
Mhm.
That's a good one.
Less
My least
birds,
favorite things.
less birds.
Mhm.
Less birds. Yeah, it's destroying ecosystems as well. And we share the earth with thousands of species, and we are very singularly responsible for how it's derailing. So indeed,
Mhm.
good one. Can we hear another one or two thoughts on some impacts?
Well, as you mentioned, the wildfires,
Yeah.
I mean, they just seem to be constant out west and just globally, not even just in my own backyard with my gardening or a drought event or whatever, but it's just in the news, it's flooding and I mean, even in Europe, you hear about towns being wiped out from the floods where I had never really heard about things in Europe happening that often.
Mhm.
Mhm.
But I mean, even, I don't know, just to me, the weather is just scaring the bedoodles out of me.
So it's
Ooh.
major droughts in some areas and flooding in other areas.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm from California and I've lived with a drought for most of my life. And then I came to Wisconsin. I was like, it rains bucket, like it pours out here. We would love your water.
Mhm.
It's
And the
unbelievable.
Colorado River,
Yeah.
California may not be able to provide drinking water. And Monica, you made a really good point about the wars over water.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Don't forget the hurricanes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Doris is, and from a very practical perspective, Doris has written that affects planning and scheduling of events.
Yes.
Life,
Mhm.
it impacts life in a major way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Mhm. Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
and just
Thank you.
overall health, when it's too hot for kids to play outside and get the exercise they need, when it's too icy, and now I notice a lot more ice on the we get a lot more ice storms than usual. That makes it unsafe for people. It really does affect people's health in all kinds of ways, including bad air.
Yeah, that's
People
true.
can't
Yeah.
breathe.
Definitely. Climate change is also, doctors have identified it's a public health issue. Like it's very much so, it impacts, it's the air we breathe. Absolutely. Thank
Mhm.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
let's.
the number of kids I would see as a teacher with
Mhm.
asthma is just going up and up and up.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Milwaukee has very high rates of asthma. I've heard from research. Yeah,
Mhm.
climate change, as you've all noted, is impacting everyone around the world, but obviously it's impacting certain communities in different ways. So, for example, extreme heat and heat waves is causing food to be hard. It's causing like low agricultural crop yields, and it's making it hard for people to just live there because heat waves impact elders and children also more than others. And communities that live in poverty also have difficulty accessing air conditioning. So when temperatures go in the 110s, 120s, and it often happens in places very much along the equator, it makes it incredibly risky to continue living there. And not only that, also just makes it impossible to grow food. So scientists have named climate change as one of the biggest threats to food production overall as well. So extreme heat is going to be one of the first things that everyone is noticing all around the world because of those greenhouse gases, again, trapping all that heat. Another change that we are seeing is air pollution. And could you change this? Could you click 2 forward, Dynasty?
Okay.
Thanks. I made the slide a little. Yeah, so air pollution is caused by all of these greenhouse gases that we're emitting to the atmosphere. And it's also being increased by wildfires. And poor air quality has led to more hospital admissions due to lung infections, asthma, and more severe allergies, as you just mentioned. And then finally, forced displacement, as we just talked about, extreme weather events like wildfires, hurricanes, and flooding have already forced millions of people to leave their homes and move to other parts of the world already. And so right now, no country in the world even has a plan for what to do with what is expected to be hundreds of thousands of climate refugees and migrants in the next century. And so these are just a few of the impacts, not to scare everyone, but these are a few of the impacts we're expecting to see around the world. Our environment influences every part of our lives. And so climate change will present a fundamental shift to the way we operate in a lot of different parts of the world. So to bring it down here to Milwaukee, now we've noticed what it does all around the world. But in Milwaukee itself, we're seeing some of these impacts more or less than others. For example, some of you have noted that we're seeing extreme weather events like heavier rainfall and flooding. The photo here is from, I believe, a storm that happened in 2018 or 2019. And so these kinds of things can lead to issues from stormwater sewage backups to basement flooding and to even health issues for people. And summer heat waves have been the leading weather-related cause of death in Wisconsin for the last 50 years. And this is even more pronounced in certain neighborhoods because of the urban environment and limited trees. So it impacts some places more than others. We also have increased food insecurity, increased health issues, and also, as I mentioned earlier, flooding, which causes also property damage and job loss for people that run their own businesses. So we're going to show you a clip in our next slide. Yes, sewer issues that Chester just dropped in the chat is a very important one. It severely impacts quality of life. And so here's a quick video made by someone from Reflow about local impacts.
Are you all able to see this?
Mhm.
Can you see it? Okay. Can you hear it?
Yes.
No,
No?
No.
no, I can't.
Oh, no. All right.
Maybe when you do share screen or original sound
Mhm.
on your Zoom, you need to turn it to on. It's in the top left corner.
Okay. I think this should work. Fingers crossed. All right. Hear that?
2010, July 22nd. A monster storm approaches.
This is insane. There's a nice dumpster floating over there.
Okay, right now I'm walking through the flood right now. Barefooted, do you mind, on the street. The water is up to my ankles. Uh-oh. Right now, up my shorts.
It unleashes over 6 inches of rain in 1 hour.
We got literally actual rapids in the street.
Sometimes we don't even get this much rain for a month. There was so much water. It had to go somewhere.
They're all backed up into each other.
Roads turned to rapids.
Right here.
I remember that.
Basements flooded. Sewers overflowed. Streets cracked like eggshells. A Cadillac collapsed into a sinkhole. Homes and businesses were flooded.
You know right where that is.
Millions of dollars were lost. A young man died, swept away by the raging waters of Lincoln Creek. For Milwaukee, it was the storm of a lifetime. Several lifetimes.
It's officially been raining for about an hour and a half now.
Except
We got
Climate change is making these kinds of superstorms more common. Big storms are scary, but we aren't powerless. Milwaukee is starting to adapt.
So with respect to time,
Green
we're gonna stop
infrastructure
here. but-
absorbs more water where it falls.
We'll go back. All right, so I believe, is this, mindfully, is this where I take over? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. We've got to process, people. We've got to process. All right. So when we consider thinking about how this affects communities, it affects communities of color worse. So some of the effects of climate change, of course, are food insecurity. Sometimes when you consider where communities of color are and where people of color reside, think about the lack of access that they already have to having fresh food options, and then how that minimizes even more with the effects of climate change. Climate change is impacting everyone on a global scale, but if you consider where people of color are living, even when you saw the video, some of those neighborhoods were predominantly neighborhoods where people of color reside. But just to go a little deeper in depth about it, here, let me see here, I'm sorry. I'm trying to navigate too many things. I'm trying to hide the sunlight from your eyes. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn my screen off here. Okay, so when we consider the roots of climate change and injustice, we have to consider a few things. So number one, considering colonialism, imperialism, and the exploitation of people of color. When we discuss the oil industries and how they affect, who they affect the most, it's usually African American, Black, and Indigenous populations. And then second, the benefits and burdens of distributed and inequality. I'm sorry, I'm so used to saying equity. The benefits and burdens of it, of the oil industry, have been distributed unequally as well. We all benefit from oil extraction because we all depend on, most of us depend on navigating using vehicles, but this is not something that those things have a financial stake in oil benefits and a lot, because oil is not only a product in constant demand, but governments make huge deals with these companies and give them massive tax breaks. But then the burdens of air pollution, toxic waste, and loss of large land rights are placed on groups that our society has considered the most expendable. And those are usually communities of color. And that is why we say this is an environmental injustice. And then lastly, certain groups of people suffer disproportionately from climate impacts. This has laid the groundwork for these same groups of people to also have an increased exposure to climate change impacts. People of color, of low income communities, also seniors, are more at risk and are affected more often, and are suffering from the effects of climate change. So if you take a look much deeper, you can see here this slide provides you with a visual. So how racism and redlining and disinvestment are the origins of environmental injustice. If you think about segregation, and how redlining has pushed people of color into certain areas, and then disinvestment happens in those same areas. It causes those same areas are experiencing extreme weather risks, unsafe water. We've had Milwaukee is one of the places that has a terrible lead issue, and we're all aware of how that's disproportionately affecting communities of color in Milwaukee. Pollution exposure, worsened mental health issues, which Joe had mentioned before, are affecting communities of color more rapidly than predominantly white communities. There were laws and policies that support this, which is unfortunate, but that is definitely the reality. And it's been this way for hundreds of years, that these laws and policies in the United States have negatively impacted communities of color and low-income communities the most. So as I said before, it's greater health risks and safety during extreme weather events. There's limited access to energy, housing, and food. And so these are some of the effects of climate change for communities of color. So if you can take a moment to share in the chat, what climate impacts have you seen in your community? You can also expand that out to, if you don't live in a community where people of color live, maybe you can say that some of the disproportionate effects that you've seen happen in communities that you don't identify with as well. You can also feel free to unmute. It doesn't have to be, you feel free to unmute as well. But Miss Mabel said increased heat and storms, which is definitely true. We've definitely seen some flooding.
Yeah.
If you can think back to, I think that was last August, that terrible storm that we had that many communities, specifically communities of color, were experiencing trees falling down, and they were not able to get to work or take their kids to school or what have you. And I don't know if you saw, there were some folks that were pretty upset about that on speaking out about it on the news, and how this is how old the trees were in the community. And but that also in turn caused for folks to then want to get their trees removed. And so there are many different layers to climate change and how it affects our communities.
I had to drive from Sherman and Capitol to all the way down to the river that night after dark, with none of the street traffic lights working. It was one of the scariest times of my entire life. And I couldn't imagine what it would be like to have to live in that chaos. It was absolute chaos. And I don't know how people survived that. And there were still trees laying on houses weeks later, because the companies that were doing tree abatement were much more likely to go to other neighborhoods first. Try to get those trees off their house. It was awful.
Yes, it was. I just remember that day, my grandma watches my son, and she was like, I was pushing her out of the door to get home. And I remember her saying how terrified she was and how dark it had gotten and how windy and rainy it was that day. And I know that that was a terrible experience for many folks. And just imagine not only having a tree on your house, but your power's been out for days, and now your food is spoiled in your refrigerator, and not having access to funds to replenish that. So yes. but that's a clear example, and also a very recent example of how climate change affects us and communities of color. And there's some comments in the chat for sure about lack of cooler air. That's something that I myself experience. I do not have central air in my home, and I live in a very old house. I think it was built in 1920. It's smoldering hot right now. I'm sweating bullets in here. But also energy inequity and substandard housing is an environmental justice issue from Pastor Tim, for sure it really is. And then my Felice stated that construction workers are required to continue working through very hot and humid days. And that is dangerous. And then Joe said that flooding in basement backups, access to green space versus concrete. Yes, yes. Higher temperatures and also access to green jobs.
Yeah.
And so this is, again, a visual to help us visualize how communities of color experience this, but also children and older adults in low-income communities. So this is just a visual, and I'll give you a second just to kind of take it in. But as we've seen, climate change is impacting us in a lot of different ways. But on the positive side, there are a lot of things we can do as a community and as a city to lessen the impacts of climate change. So some of the examples, and as Pastor Tim said, was the homegrown program coordinator for the City of Milwaukee's Environmental Collaboration Office. They have an initiative that is the Eco Neighborhood Program, which is how Sherman Park and I have built a wonderful relationship through the Eco Neighborhood Program, where we help residents through the process. So it looks different for each organization and different residents. But what we'd like to do is support them in their environmental endeavors. So for example, Lindsay Heights, which was our first environmental or eco neighborhood, their goal was to establish different areas that were environmentally friendly. And so they developed the Eco Neighborhoods tour. And so the tour went to different designations around Lindsay Heights that were eco-friendly spaces. Sherman Park has been a great neighborhood to work with that has done webinars like this one to inform residents about environmental issues, but also ways to be environmentally friendly, and also informing folks about how to do tree maintenance. But in addition to that, Sherman Park has also been awesome in developing their own areas where they have planted trees, where they've had, oh my gosh, I'm Earth Day and May events, and have been just stewards of environmental justice. And then MMSD and Clean Wisconsin have the Neighborhood Green Infrastructure Program, where residents are able to gain access to free rainwater collection systems. And I don't know if I'm missing anything. I know my Thalia could probably speak better to it than I can, but that's one of the great benefits that those two organizations have provided to residents. Mythily, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, just like a brief overview of the program. It's Clean Wisconsin's been working with MMSD to install these rain barrels, rain gardens in Milwaukee's 30th Street Industrial Corridor. So this area that we've identified as being at risk for flooding during extreme storms. And so through this partnership, residents are able to get rain gardens and rain barrels at a low cost or no cost to the resident. So a number of community organizations also have this similar partnership throughout various neighborhoods in Milwaukee with MMSD. But the goal is to capture the first 1/2 inch of stormwater where it falls. That's sort of their overarching motto and the goal that they're trying to get all residents to be a part of through having rain gardens and rain barrels. So we'll talk a little bit more later if you're interested in how to get involved with that, but it's a cool local initiative on stormwater management. Thanks.
Thanks, Michaelie. And then Groundwork Milwaukee is developing the Climate Safe Neighborhoods Initiative. Right now, they are gathering data and information about how segregation has caused environmental effects for communities of color. And they've got extensive information about it. I don't know if that initiative is fully in effect yet, but they have been gathering information to examine climate data, green infrastructure data, health data, and demographics and demographic disparities, as well as an equity indicator that is focused primarily on housing segregation and how it's led to environmental problems for people of color. This tool will be available for nonprofits so that they can identify the problem and develop initiatives to address that. And then lastly, I know Joe is on the call. So Joe, if I miss anything, please chime in. I know you're still cooking dinner or eating dinner at this point, but if I miss anything, please feel free to chime in. But Milwaukee Water Commons has the Branch Out Milwaukee program, which has been a great partner with the Environmental Collaboration Office and this Sherman Park Eco Ambassadors, I will call you because you're so great. But they have partnered on the Urban Forestry Grant. And recently we just had a spectacular event with them to plant trees in Sherman Park. And we've done so twice now in Sherman Park. So Milwaukee Water Commons has been a great partner and a great organization to partner with their Branch Out Milwaukee program. Joe, if you have anything to add, please feel free to do so.
I'll just say real briefly, I think the goal for Branch Out Milwaukee is to try to bring more trees into the city, especially in neighborhoods like Sherman Park that have less trees than other neighborhoods around the city, for some of the benefits that trees bring in terms of reducing flooding, lowering temperatures, mitigating some of the climate impacts we were talking about. But this grant that we've been working on has been about planting trees, but also recognizing we need to be maintaining the trees that we do plant so that we don't run into those major storm issues and have trees falling on folks' stuff. So right now we have had some successful planting events. It's been amazing to partner with the folks on this call. And we're also looking to be supporting tree maintenance for residents on private property as well this year and doing some inventory of the trees in the neighborhood and looking to continue this partnership and support the leadership of residents to be speaking into climate action in Milwaukee.
Thanks, Joe. Well said, better than I said it. Thank you. And then also the city of Milwaukee has other programs that you can get involved with. So the ME2 program is the energy efficiency program where you can receive incentives to make your home more energy efficient. So it would be, the process is applying for a loan through Summit Credit Union, but you also get bonus incentives like $3,000 per household. And you can do different updates. So I don't think it's anything that needs to be, like it's not one dimensional in its approach. You could get updated windows, you can get an updated furnace, you can have access to things that will make your home more energy efficient. As most of the Sherman Park folks know, we are often having folks using this program frequently. And so the funding for this program is, I believe there's still money for this program, but with the partner that we're working with, we're not always certain if they have enough money and how many homes they have left. But still, I would suggest reaching out if you would like to make your home more energy efficient. Second, we also have the solar energy program, so Milwaukee Shines. Milwaukee Shines is an awesome program. Again, a program that you would be getting energy efficiency on your home, but you would also have to go through another entity to get the funding for it. But sometimes we have group buys, and group buys are a wonderful thing, because if you're not able to afford getting solar energy on your home, you can work with other residents to purchase that. So right now, we're not doing any group buy programs at the moment, but it is something that I think will come back into effect in 2023. I keep forgetting what year it is. But yes, so we've had 282 homeowners who have taken advantage of this program, and we would like to see more communities of color take advantage of this program in the future. And then Maithili.
Yeah, thanks. So let me just find myself in the slide. Okay, and so finally, the city and county of Milwaukee is addressing the impacts of climate change, as well as the racial and environmental injustices we've been naming throughout this presentation, with its climate and equity plan. So the climate and equity plan is currently being developed, and its goals are to reduce greenhouse gas emissions at a pace that slows down climate change and reduces those impacts. It's also working to address those environmental injustices that have stemmed from racist laws and policies, and that are now impacting communities of color and low-income communities. And so this plan, the goal is to provide permanent living wage green jobs for the people who have been most impacted by our previous fossil fuel infrastructure. And so this means looking at neighborhoods that have lost jobs due to shifts in manufacturing in the last few decades, or people that work in facilities like oil and coal that aren't good for their health. So we're working, the Milwaukee Climate and Equity Plan is working to address needs, both those needs at the same time. And so we could go to the next slide. So this climate and equity plan's been developed through a collaboration between local government, nonprofit organizations, research experts from various fields such as businesses and energy, buildings and energy, as well as residents and community organizations. And so they've been meeting for the last about a year and a half or so to come up with 10 big ideas that will outline the majority of the climate and equity plan. So on the screen, there are these 10 big ideas, but I'll just kind of talk about them in a summary. So they came up with recommendations that would improve things like job opportunities, housing, public transportation, even food supply, and how to make these resources all more available and accessible to Milwaukee residents. So recommendations also address how energy is being used, because that's where climate change stems from. And so we look at that both in large commercial buildings, and also looking at how we can make our homes more energy efficient through using solar and wind energy. And so the 10 big ideas on the screen talk about things like green and healthy homes for our communities, as well as more housing that is net zero, so that doesn't produce more emissions than it captures. We also talk about a green jobs accelerator, nature in the city, and resilience ambassadors. So we'll dig into these benefits in our next slide. Great, 1 second. Awesome. So to start addressing the impacts of climate change, we're going to do what's known as, we're going to create more green jobs. Because the green jobs are jobs in businesses that benefit from environment or conservation efforts. So green job opportunities range from manufacturing to plumbing to electricians to educators and administrators and a lot more. The opportunities are endless. And because we're all trying to shift and adapt to this moment, there's a lot of work to be done. So Milwaukee wants to launch a Green Jobs Accelerator, which will create a pipeline so that these opportunities are directly available to communities of color and low-income communities. They'll do this by reaching out to these communities directly through direct outreach, working with community orgs, and then providing frameworks for them to get trained and certified and land well-paying permanent jobs, as we've said. The plan will also make housing more affordable. Improvements will be made to current homes so the cost of heating and cooling our homes is lower. And then there's also a plan to create a green manufacturing facility at the Century City Business Park. This facility will make it easier to build new homes, which means houses become more available and can respond to our current housing need faster. These houses will be built on vacant and underused lots in between current housing and will be energy efficient. So really taking advantage of opportunities here. Nature in the City will address heat islands in our city by planting more trees, which will help cool our bodies during heat waves and clean the air of pollutants. And finally, resilience ambassadors will make it easier for residents to connect to all of these resources. Clearly, the city of Milwaukee has more programs and policies than I have fingers, and so it seems necessary to have dedicated people in communities that can help people access all of these benefits. So next slide. Great. So we went over a lot today. So we wanted to summarize a few of the ways that you could get involved right now in addressing climate change and protecting your community. So first, if you're a homeowner and you're interested in capturing stormwater by installing a rain garden, a rain barrel, a storm garden, or even just more trees on your property, then you could email me. I'll drop my email in the chat in a minute, and I'll send you the sign-up list to get to learn on how to get the green infrastructure programs for your home. And so this is a great way to help the city reach that goal of capturing the first half inch of stormwater where it falls so that we can prevent issues like basement flooding and sewage backups. Also, you can, if you're interested, look into the Me Too program that Dynasty mentioned earlier. I'll put the link for that in the chat right now. But there's, as she said, this might still be available, so if you're a homeowner, that's an option. And then there's also a lot of people that are renters, and so one really neat thing that you can do to reduce your energy usage and your energy bills is by ordering a free Focus on Energy value kit at this website that I'm also going to put in the chat now. And so Focus on Energy is the state's energy efficiency program, and energy efficiency as a whole is a critical step towards reducing our climate, our emissions. And so you can order these value kits every year to your place and pick between packs that offer things like LED bulbs, power strips, and even shower heads. And these are all free ways that you can reduce your environmental impact. And then finally, one thing we can all do is connect with our neighbors. You can share the information you learned today by either just talking to them about it, sending them the link to this recording, or bringing up some of these programs we mentioned. And ask if they need anything and if they would want you to check in on them during a heat wave or an extreme weather event. So being part of a community resilience effort. So I'm going to pass it over to Dynasty to talk about one last thing.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. Instead, I changed the slide. And so you can also reach out to your alderperson and voice your support. So in this community, Sherman Park, I'm sure you all are active residents, and I know that you know your alderperson is Russell Stamper. And you can feel free to contact him to let him know that you are all passionate about climate change and you would like to be a part of getting involved in the Climate and Equity Action Plan. One thing you should know is that you are more than welcome to let him know that this is urgent and climate change is getting involved in supporting the climate change efforts would benefit us all. Right now, just a fraction of the city's budget goes towards the climate action plan. And lastly, we can all vote for candidates that will take climate action into consideration and are passionate about it, because that's important. And we all know that the next voting date is August 9th. And it's the fall primaries for those who will represent us on the state and federal level. And so please don't forget to get involved as much as possible. I don't think we realize how often we're being affected by climate change. And I really hope that this presentation has provided some perspective on some of the ways that we've been affected in the past and in the future and right now. So please feel free to share in the chat or unmute some of your perspectives. And this is Mythalise and my first time presenting this. And we plan to present this more. So feedback is definitely encouraged so we can make the necessary adjustments.
Dynasty, we have 2 other alder people, so don't forget. Khalif Rainey.
Oh yes,
and Michael
Khalif
Murphy.
Rainey, so sorry.
Yeah, so we got 3.
So sorry about that. That is true. Sherman Park is unique in that regard for sure.
But you're raising a really important issue that we have talked about, and how do we get our city officials more involved? And it was great to see some of our representatives at the tree planting on Arbor Day. But that's another next step for us here in Sherman Park, in partnership with SPCA and all our neighbors and our Green Ambassadors Group, and collaboration with Eco Office. Yeah, thank you, Dennis and Mikale.
I wanted to ask a question. I know you mentioned the Century City is going to have the manufacturing location for homes, the eco-friendly homes. Can you tell us a little bit about that? A little bit more? Do you have any more detail?
Yeah.
How many jobs will it provide? How many homes are you looking to produce? When is that going to start?
So if I can chime in, I'm sorry, from just from the eco perspective, that was the hopes were to get that into Century City. I think that there have been some roadblocks that are keeping the process from moving forward. And that is something I think that Eric Schomburger could speak more to, but I don't think that that has been made official yet. And so I want to just make sure that I make that clear before we move forward, because those are things that, Ms. Mabel, those are things that definitely would have been shared as we go through the process, as I was saying, hey, this is how many jobs will be shared. But right now, I think that there are some things that still need to be ironed out with other departments about how that process is going to work out.
Okay, thank you for that. And I'll make sure I reach out to Eric.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. To add, the climate and equity plan proposals are all still very much proposals. And there's still a process where we are trying to get more community feedback throughout the summer and fall. And then we believe it's going to the council, I believe, late fall this year for approval. So they're still looking for feedback, and it's still very much in the works. Thanks.
That's what I was going to ask about, Michael A. Thank you very much, because I was wondering about the process. You know, we've heard about the city county climate and equity plan. And I believe Jermaine has been involved in that, hasn't he, Mabel? And Joe?
I think he has, maybe, in and out of meetings on some of the housing perspectives.
Joe, have you been involved with that?
Only loosely around some of the tree planting and some of the workforce specific to pathways into the water sector.
So Michael Lee, is that something, or in Dynasty, is that something that you're asking for input from the community? Is that something we could help organize in Sherman Park?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a work group that we're both part of that is doing outreach for this, and so we're constantly looking at organizing events. I believe someone might even be trying to attend the Earth Day in May event this weekend to talk about the climate and equity plan.
Oh, great.
Yeah. But I just dropped in the chat also the website for it. And there are going to be events throughout the summer on that website. There are spots, there's like place to leave your feedback. And the idea is to get feedback from the community about whether or not the plan meets the needs that they've identified. And if not, how those needs could better be met. So if that helps as a prompt.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I thought it was very informative. Thank you very much for putting this together. I hope more groups will want to listen to this and more people will want to listen. I know it's a nice summer night. I know my next door neighbor's having a birthday party for their grandmother. So, but I just hope more people can see it. I did have one nuts and bolts question. You mentioned in one of the slides, storm garden. What is that? GUARDEN?
Yeah, that is a great question. I was also curious when I heard about it. Let me see if I can look it up. I believe it's a local initiative, actually. Yeah.
Is that when the downspout is redirected to the yard?
Mm,
So I've got a couple of those.
so I think it looks like kind of like a flower. It's a flower bed that collects stormwater.
Oh,
Do you have the flyer that uh, that has the rain barrels and the native garden? Because it's on there. I know we had it. If you could share that flyer, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
so it's different than a rain garden?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
It's
okay.
different than a rain garden in that a rain garden would be in the ground, and that would the purpose of that would be that the roots would collect the water and store it. Whereas I believe the storm garden's purpose is to be sort of like a flower bed that can collect it and
It's kind of like in the parking lots of some of the stores.
yeah,
Doing some of these.
exactly.
There-
Like to make it more accessible too in its own way.
There's a church on 55th and Lloyd that has 3 or 4 of them around the building.
Oh.
And they're about a little bit taller than knee high, filled with plants that are on the surface, but the water goes into the soil and then is out other parts of the soil, but it keeps that garden fed and it breaks up the flow of the water.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
And I
that's
know on Sherman Boulevard, several
piece.
years ago, they built those, they're a depression with really beautiful flowers in them and they capture the stormwater. I wonder if that's what that is.
Oh, the bioswales.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Swells. Yeah. You're talking about Spirit of Peace on 55th and
Lloyd.
55th,
Yeah.
55th and Lloyd.
Yeah,
Exactly.
So this
That's
is
what
the
they've got.
storm garden.
nice. Yeah, that's exactly it. I
Okay.
think it's a new addition to what Clean Wisconsin is doing this year, so I'm not as familiar this time.
Michael,
believe
that was one of the questions
shared-
I was going to. Oh, go ahead,
Yeah.
Monica.
No, I wasn't saying.
Did I interrupt somebody?
That was me. This is Mabel. I was just saying that I think we shared the flyer for Clean Wisconsin. It may be on our website or on our Facebook page with the different varieties. I'm actually looking for it now to see if I can pull it up to show, the different options for, that was the storm garden.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here.
And I'm sorry, everyone. I actually have to head out because I've got to go get the little. So I do have to head out right now.
Well,
I'm so sorry.
Good.
thank you,
Thank you.
Dynasty.
And
And
before we all go, I
you.
just like, I put in the chat box, there will be a block party at Hepatha Lutheran on 17th and Locust this Sunday. I hate to advertise competing things, but it's to help people identify and figure out what to do with lead in their pipes, which
Oh.
is vital. You know, knowing what lead poisoning does to kids' brains, I want much of this recklessness has to do with lead exposure. But
I agree.
so
I also-
the information is there if anybody wants to go in as well. There's time to go to both places.
thank you, Monica. Yeah.
Okay.
I also
Thank you,
put my
Dynasty.
personal email in there if anyone wants to reach out as well.
Okay.
Oh,
And
great.
I'll add a slide to this presentation with all the links that I've put in the chat today, and I'll send a copy of that to Miss Mabel. Is that the right person to send it to maybe get it out to all participants?
Sure, and also if you can send, the slide deck, that'd be fine, yep.
Perfect, I'll do that. Great, thank you all
Thank you,
very
Dynasty.
Thanks,
Okay.
everyone.
Good luck.
Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Pray for you.
Dynasty.
Here.
We'll
Bye.
see
Good
you.
job tonight.
I'm sure we will be seeing you and working with you.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure. I'm not going anywhere.
Okay. And Michael Lee has gone too.
Bye.
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 Sherry, Steve, Ann, and Doris, you're welcome to stay too. Mabel.
Okay, we're still recording, so.
Okay, let's
There you
stop
go.
recording.